Welcome back, Mitchell Mustangs. Happy Monday. It's so great to see you. First, all of your language arts teachers, and I would like to thank each of you for doing a fantastic job last week as we shifted from our face-to-face classroom environment platform to our online classroom platform. So, fantastic job. Next, I want to remind you that we will follow in the same structure that we followed last week. Monday through Thursday will be Reader's Workshop, a short mini lesson embedded inside of Charlotte's Web. Then we invite you to read your independent reading book, thinking about the different lessons that we discuss each day, finishing off with writing a reader's response. And you can use the reader's response form that is on the Canvas page. You may use any of the prompts, and you may reuse the prompts if you choose to. That's truly up to you. And how you save your work is also your choice. So if you're writing your reader's response on paper, just make sure to keep it all in one place, whether it be a notebook or lined paper that you keep in a folder, and date each page. If you're choosing to do it electronically, we invite you to create a new folder in Google Docs, and then each day create a new Google document with the date. Both ways are fantastic ways to keep yourself organized so that when we all come back together, we will be able to see your self-assessment of your reader's response and see your reader's log, everything that you've been reading, and it will just really be a great thing for all of us to stay organized. So today, as we go back into Charlotte's Web, I'm thinking about characters and how great readers pay attention to characters, and we've been introduced to many characters so far in this book, Charlotte's Web. And as a reader, I like to follow the characters, and depending on the point of view, sometimes I'll know just what the characters say and do. Sometimes I'll know their inner thoughts. It does depend on the point of view. And I'm thinking about these characters when I'm reading, and I wonder, why did the author craft this character? How does this character fit inside of the whole story? Why is this character inside of the story, and what is the character doing to help me make meaning of the whole story? So just thinking about a few characters that have been introduced to us so far. Characters are complicated, and I do have to pay attention to everything so that I really understand the character. And in the beginning, we were introduced to Mr. Arable, and I would say that he's a hard worker because he's a farmer. At first, I might, if I wasn't paying close attention, I might think, oh, he's so mean, he's going to kill the runt. But then as I read on, I understand that's just what farmers do. And he's really very kind. It literally says his kind voice and his kind manner. But then his actions show that he saves Wilbur and allows his daughter Fern to take care of Wilbur. And we meet Fern, and she truly, I loved her right from the beginning of the book, because it might seem that she was a little disrespectful, but really, as I pay attention, it showed that she was so strong-willed that she said to her father, "If I were a runt, would you have killed me too?" And that really was, in my opinion, a shifting moment where her dad changed his mind and then permitted her to raise Wilbur. Fern's also extremely kind. The book goes to tell us how she warms the bottles and feeds him milk and puts him in her baby carriage, and she just watches him with such love. So she's strong-willed and kind. We meet Wilbur, and Wilbur seems so innocent to me, so innocent as he's with Fern in the beginning, and then he goes to the barn, and we learn that he finds out for the first time that there are plans for him at Christmas time that don't sound so great for him. And he cries, and he definitely seems like someone who needs help from people around him and from friends around him. So we'll keep reading to learn more about Wilbur. I'm really interested in Templeton, because Templeton, I would not use the word kind to describe Templeton. He seems very self-serving. He literally says at one point, it says Templeton takes care of himself. He is not interested in becoming friends with Wilbur, so I'm curious to see why Templeton is inside of this story. So I'm going to keep paying attention to him. Then we meet Charlotte, and Charlotte is she seems beautiful and elegant by the way she's described. She seems very strong and tough by the way she catches her flies, yet kind the way that she makes it so the flies don't feel what's about to happen to them after they're caught in her web. And we ended with the last chapter with Wilbur was just completely in despair and distraught when he found out what was about to happen to him come Christmas time. And Charlotte says she's going to help him. Who's going to help me? And she says, I will. I believe that Charlotte is going to help Wilbur. So today, let's read on. Let's follow these different characters. And every time we learn something new about a character, see if it follows the line of that character or if possibly the character is changing. And also, too, why is that character in this story? What is that character doing to hold the story, to make the story push forward, and for us to figure out the entire purpose of the story? So let's read on today. Chapter 8. A Talk at Home. On Sunday morning, Mr. and Mrs. Arable and Fern were sitting at breakfast in the kitchen. Avery had finished and was upstairs looking for a slingshot. Did you know that Uncle Homer's goslings had hatched? Asked Fern. How many? Asked Mr. Arable. 7, replied Fern. There were 8 eggs, but 1 egg didn't hatch, and the goose told Templeton she didn't want it any more, so he took it away. The goose did what? Asked Mrs. Arable, gazing at her daughter with a queer, worried look. Told Templeton she didn't want the egg any more, repeated Fern. Who is Templeton? Asked Mrs. Arable. He's the rat, replied Fern. None of us like him much. Who's us? Asked Mr. Arable. Oh, everybody in the barn cellar. Wilbur and the sheep and the lambs and the goose and the gander and the goslings and Charlotte and me. Charlotte? Said Mrs. Arable. Who's Charlotte? She's Wilbur's best friend. She's terribly clever. What does she look like? Asked Mrs. Arable. Well, said Fern thoughtfully, she has 8 legs. All spiders do, I guess. Charlotte is a spider? Asked Fern's mother. Fern nodded. A big gray one. She has a web across the top of Wilbur's doorway. She catches flies and sucks their blood. Wilbur adores her. Does he really? Said Mrs. Arable rather vaguely. She was staring at Fern with a worried expression on her face. Oh, yes, Wilbur adores Charlotte, said Fern. Do you know what Charlotte said when the goslings hatched? I haven't the faintest idea, said Mr. Arable. Tell us. Well, when the first gosling stuck its little head out from under the goose, I was sitting on my stool in the corner and Charlotte was on her web. She made a speech. She said, I am sure that every one of us here in the barn cellar will be gratified to learn that after 4 weeks of unremitting effort and patience on the part of the goose, she now has something to show for it. Don't you think that was a pleasant thing for her to say? Yes, I do, said Mrs. Arable. And now, Fern, it's time to get ready for Sunday school. And tell Avery to get ready. And this afternoon you can tell me more about what goes on in Uncle Homer's barn. Aren't you spending quite a lot of time there? You go there almost every afternoon, don't you? I like it there, replied Fern. She wiped her mouth and ran upstairs. After she had left the room, Mrs. Arable spoke in a low voice to her husband. I worry about Fern, she said. Did you hear the way she rambled on about the animals, pretending that Mr. Arable chuckled. Maybe they do talk, he said. I've sometimes wondered. At any rate, don't worry about Fern. She's just got a lively imagination. Kids think they hear all sorts of things. Just the same, I do worry about her, replied Mrs. Arable. I think I shall ask Dr. Doring about her the next time I see him. He loves Fern almost as much as we do, and I want him to know how queerly she is acting about that pig and everything. I don't think it's normal. You know perfectly well animals don't talk. Mr. Arable grinned. Maybe our ears aren't as sharp as Fern's, he said. Wilbur's Boost. A spider's web is stronger than it looks. Although it is made of thin, delicate strands, the web is not easily broken. However, a web gets torn every day by the insects that kick around in it, and a spider must rebuild it when it gets full of holes. Charlotte liked to do her weaving during the late afternoon, and Fern liked to sit nearby and watch. One afternoon she heard a most interesting conversation and witnessed a strange event. You have awfully hairy legs, Charlotte, said Wilbur as the spider busily worked at her task. My legs are hairy for a good reason, replied Charlotte. Furthermore, each leg of mine has 7 sections: the coxa, the trochanter, the femur, the patella, the tibia, the metatarsus, and the tarsus. Wilbur sat bolt upright. You're kidding, he said. No, I'm not either. Say those names again. I didn't catch them the first time. Coxa, trochanter, femur, patella, tibia, metatarsus, and tarsus. Goodness, said Wilbur, looking down at his own chubby legs. I don't think my legs have 7 sections. Well, said Charlotte, you and I lead different lives. You don't have to spin a web. That takes real leg work. I could spin a web if I tried, said Wilbur, boasting. I've just never tried. Let's see you do it, said Charlotte. Fern chuckled softly, and her eyes grew wide with love for the pig. Okay, replied Wilbur. You coach me and I'll spin one. It must be a lot of fun to spin a web. How do I start? Take a breath, said Charlotte, smiling. Wilbur breathed deeply. Now climb to the highest place you can get to, like this. Charlotte raced up to the top of the doorway. Wilbur scrambled to the top of the manure pile. Very good, said Charlotte. Now make an attachment with your spinnerets. Hurl yourself into space and let out a drag line as you go down. Wilbur hesitated for a moment, then jumped out into the air. He glanced hastily behind to see if a piece of rope was following him to check his fall. But nothing seemed to be happening in his rear, and the next thing he knew, he landed with a thump. Oh! He grunted. Charlotte laughed so hard her web began to sway. What did I do wrong? Asked the pig when he recovered from his bump. Nothing, said Charlotte. It was a nice try. I think I'll try again, said Wilbur cheerfully. I believe what I need is a little piece of string to hold me. The pig walked out to his yard. You there, Templeton, he called. The rat poked his head out from under the trough. Got a little piece of string I could borrow? Asked Wilbur. I needed to spin a web. Yes, indeed, replied Templeton, who saved string. No trouble at all. Anything to oblige. He crept down into his hole, pushed the goose egg out of the way, and returned with an old piece of dirty white string. Wilbur examined it. That's just the thing, he said. Tie one end to my tail, will you, Templeton? Wilbur crouched low with his thin, curly tail toward the rat. Templeton seized the string, passed it around the end of the pig's tail, and tied 2 half hitches. Charlotte watched in delight. Like Fern, she was truly fond of Wilbur, whose smelly pen and stale food attracted the flies that she needed, and she was proud to see that he was not a quitter and was willing to try again to spin a web. While the rat and the spider and the little girl watched, Wilbur climbed again to the top of the manure pile, full of energy and hope. "Everybody watch!" he cried, and summoning all his strength, he threw himself into the air head first. The string trailed behind him, but as he had neglected to fasten the other end to anything, it didn't really do any good, and Wilbur landed with a thud, crushed and hurt. Tears came to his eyes. Templeton grinned. Charlotte just sat quietly. After a bit, she spoke. "You can't spin a web, Wilbur, and I advise you to put the idea out of your mind. You lack 2 things needed for spinning a web." "What are they?" asked Wilbur sadly. "You lack a set of spinnerets, and you lack knowing how. But cheer up, you don't need a web. Zuckerman supplies you with 3 big meals a day. Why should you worry about trapping food?" Wilbur sighed. "You're ever so much cleverer and brighter than I am, Charlotte. I guess I was just trying to show off. Serves me right." Templeton untied his string and took it back to his home. Charlotte returned to her weaving. "You needn't feel too badly, Wilbur," she said. "Not many creatures can spin webs. Even men aren't as good at it as spiders, although they think they're pretty good, and they'll try anything. Did you ever hear of the Queensboro Bridge?" Wilbur shook his head. "Is it a web?" "Sort of," replied Charlotte. "But do you know how long it took men to build it? 8 whole years. My goodness, I would have starved to death waiting that long. I can make a web in a single evening." "What do people catch in the Queensboro Bridge? Bugs?" asked Wilbur. "No," said Charlotte. "They don't catch anything. They just keep trotting back and forth across the bridge, thinking there's something better on the other side. If they'd hang head down at the top of the thing and wait quietly, maybe something good would come along. But no, with men it's rush, 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 every minute. I'm glad I'm sedentary. I'm a spider." "What does sedentary mean?" asked Wilbur. "Means I sit still a good part of the time and don't go wandering all over creation. I know a good thing when I see it, and my web is a good thing. I stay put and I wait for what comes. Gives me a chance to think." "Well, I'm sort of sedentary myself, I guess," said the pig. "I have to hang around here whether I want to or not. You know, where I'd really like to be this evening." "Where?" "In a forest, looking for beech nuts and truffles and delectable roots, pushing leaves aside with my wonderful strong nose, searching and sniffing along the ground, smelling, smelling, smelling." "You smell just the way you are," remarked a lamb who just walked in. "I can smell you from here. You're the smelliest creature in the place." Wilbur hung his head. His eyes grew wet with tears. Charlotte noticed his embarrassment, and she spoke sharply to the lamb. "Let Wilbur alone," she said. "He has a perfect right to smell, considering his surroundings. You're no bundle of sweet peas yourself. Furthermore, you are interrupting a very pleasant conversation. What were we talking about, Wilbur, when we were so rudely interrupted?" "Oh, I don't remember," said Wilbur. "It doesn't make any difference. Let's not talk any more for a while, Charlotte. I'm getting sleepy. You go ahead and finish fixing your web, and I'll lie here and watch you. It's a lovely evening." Wilbur stretched out on his side. Twilight settled over Zuckerman's barn, and a feeling of peace. Fern knew it was almost supper time, but she couldn't bear to leave. Swallows passed on silent wings in and out of the doorways, bringing food to their young ones. From across the road, a bird sang, "Whippoorwill, whippoorwill." Lurvy sat down under an apple tree and lit his pipe. The animal sniffed the familiar smell of tobacco. Wilbur heard the trill of the tree toad and the occasional slamming of the kitchen door. All these sounds made him feel comfortable and happy, for he loved life and loved to be a part of the world on a summer evening. But as he lay there, he remembered what the old sheep had told him. The thought of death came to him, and he began to tremble with fear. Readers, we're going to stop there today. As you read your independent reading books, I invite you to pay very close attention to all the characters and follow what they say and do and what the authors sometimes tell us depending on the point of view of the book that we are reading. Right now, I'm learning more about Wilbur. So Wilbur, I said he was very innocent, and he's following along the innocent piece, but he also seems a little fragile. And that is following along with this need for a friend and needing to be helped by other people. But he definitely cries a lot, and that goes along with the innocence and then also makes me think that he's a little fragile, and so we need to watch out. And I'm wondering if Charlotte is strong and clever because she will be a helpful friend in some way to Wilbur. I'm following that theory as well. So, Mitchell Mustangs, happy Monday. The last thing that I want to say to you is to stay healthy, happy reading and writing, and thank you so much.